Considering how beloved Karl Franz is by pretty much everyone who knows even a little bit about the Empire in Warhammer Fantasy, it might be difficult to believe there was a time in which he was seen as the underdog to become Emperor. A young upstart, they called him, with too little experience to rule. After Franz's father was assassinated and the throne was open once more, there was a serious question about who should be the one to take the seat. The other leading man for the position of Emperor was one Boris Todbringer. Toddy! It has been a while, my old friend, nice to see you again. It's hard to imagine the Empire without Karl Franz at its helm, but in today's video, we'll be taking a look at what the Empire in its final age would have been like under a very different ruler. I think before we go into Boris's Empire, it's important to understand just how close we were to it in canon. Now, I know as this setting is fiction that really Games Workshop could just write anything down and make it canon or not, but in the universe itself, Karl Franz faced some pretty tough odds. Yes, his father Luitpold was the Emperor before him, but Emperor is not an inherited position. It is one earned through merit and through the vote of the other elector counts. At the start of the election, Todbringer seemed a much better candidate. A more established statesman, a man who would have taken a hard line against any and all challenges to imperial rule, and a much more effective emperor than the wet lettuce Luitpold had been. In the first vote, it looked like Franz was set to lose, but as the election went on and Franz's friend Maximilian von Königswald helped him convince more counts, the story changed. It also helped that there were attempts made on Franz's life, a real boost to the sympathy vote, that. For the election not to go in Franz's favour, we don't necessarily need him to end up 6 feet under. Instead, I actually think it makes for a more compelling what-if universe if Franz remains alive, becoming the elector count for Reichland, just without the privilege of being Emperor too. And so, instead of Franz being successful in his election, we'll have him lose, though only just. It wouldn't be right to say he'd get absolutely stomped, as he is a very likeable politician, and someone that seemed a logical choice for Emperor, even from the start, just not to the other elector counts. And so, Boris is given Galmaraz as well as the throne. This isn't the first time the Emperor isn't going to hold court in Altdorf, and so Boris has all the politicians and nobles ready for a move to Middenheim. He could have moved himself down, but as a man incredibly proud of his province, I wouldn't expect Boris to budge when he can inconvenience everyone else instead. This might not seem like a massive change, but moving the political seat of the Empire from Altdorf to Middenheim is going to have some rippling effects on politics, religion, and more. With Middenland at the centre of all of the Empire politics, you can be sure the province is going to get a lot of attention from the new Emperor. While Reichland won't fall into ruin or anything like that, you'd imagine Toddy would want Middenland to be raised up to a similar position of safety, security, and prosperity. Despite Middenland's history and authority, it is under a far more consistent threat than Reichland thanks to the unruly Drakwald forest, which is home to thousands of goblins and beastmen. We know from the lore that more than a decade after the election, Boris decided he wanted to purge the Drakwald, but I think that as Emperor, he would call in as many Empire armies as he could to rid this now central province of the thorns in its side as soon as possible. With his own mighty force, as well as that of nearby Empire provinces, I think that Boris would actually manage to tame the Drakwald, which would help to give him the Middenland of his dreams. Of course, there's the problem of Khazrak One-Eye, the Beast Lord that in canon took Boris's eye after Toddy took his own the year prior. Personally, I'm not sure how much it matters whether Boris loses an eye or not, but I don't think that with the strength of his force as Emperor, that Khazrak would be able to get away as many times as he does in the canon universe. Instead, Boris, as the bull-headed and strong statesman that he is, would be able to whip up enough troops to purge the Drakwald. However, this focus on beastmen and goblins will mean that some parts of the Empire are left less defended. Toddy loves Middenheim, but his focus on his home province is likely to lead to some unpopularity over time. It's a bit like if Trump ran his campaign on making Idaho great again. It's great for the citizens of that state, but if you're someone who lives on the other side of the country, you're out of luck. For Warhammer, it's possible that the undead all the way over in the east are largely left alone for their own provinces to deal with in the same way that Toddy is left to tame the Drakwald on his own in canon. Moving the Empire's centre to Middenland also means a great boost for the cult of Ulrich. Considering how embedded Sigmar is in Empire society, I wouldn't say that people will forget the man god or anything so extreme, but you would see more people flocking to Ulrich, and the cult overall feeling emboldened. Rather than it taking a firm second place to Sigmar's cult, you would see it perhaps rise to a rivaling position again. While this will sound good for Middenland, again, it's going to leave the Theogonists of Sigmar feeling like they're getting the cold shoulder. Once more, for the sake of his own people, Todbringer risks irritating other major powers in the Empire. As someone committed wholly to the Empire, Karl Franz looks to make up for Boris's shortcomings when he can. He's sore about losing the title of Emperor, but isn't looking to claim it for himself. However, as Karl ensures stability across the Empire, Toddy sees betrayal coming from within. He has Balthasar Gelt and his agents inspect Franz to see what he's plotting, but they find nothing. He is simply a popular figure among the folk of the Empire, one that makes the elector counts wish they'd gone with another option at the election. Still, Franz has no lofty ambitions, he simply wishes to keep the Empire as united as possible. As time goes on though, Toddy sees that the people of Middenland love him, but the people of the Empire love Franz. At court they are amicable, but a resentment begins to build between the contenders. In canon, Toddy and Franz have a rivalry, but it's not one that ever comes to blows, so it makes sense that even when Boris wins the throne, he still finds that he's not always Franz's better. This comes to a head when Toddy's second wife dies 10 years after he becomes emperor in this timeline, and he falls into somewhat of a depression. His wife's death combined with the weight of running the empire just seems too much for the aging statesman. For a time, Karl Franz and the other elector counts alongside Balthasar Gelt lead in Toddy's stead, and actions are taken to secure the rest of the empire, rather than just keep forces in the Drakwald and Middenheim. This means the return of beastmen, but they are a fraction of what they once were. As Toddy languishes, rumours spread, and other counts believe they should hold another election soon. Todbringer can't have long left, they whisper, but it is Karl Franz who puts a stop to this gossiping, reminding the counts they voted for this man, and that he is a worthy emperor still. But Todbringer seems a shell of the man they elected with each passing day. That is, until the Battle of Blackfire pass. Even with Toddy's empire having strengthened armies, the War of Vorgaz's Ironjaw still seems a threat to the Southlands. Karl Franz tries to muster an army in time to save Marius Leitdorf, but he arrives too late, and the Reichlanders soon find themselves in a fight for their lives. Karl Franz is a strong warrior, an excellent tactician, but the orcs are too mighty, too brutish. It seems as if they'll break through when atop a griffin, Boris Todbringer, the Emperor, claims Ironjaw's head with Galmaraz. A host of Middenlanders at his back, Toddy pushes the orcs back, slaughtering them and reminding the Empire of who he is. Todbringer himself had his doubts in his depression. Is he good enough to be emperor? Perhaps Franz is the better choice. But when he knew his people needed him, he could no longer wallow in his sadness, and he fought like a man possessed to deal with the threats coming the Empire's way. From then on, Todbringer may not have earned the admiration of the people of the Empire, but he had their respect, and would personally lead the forces that set out to destroy the Empire's enemies. As I've hinted at before, I think Boris Todbringer's empire would be a lot more militaristic, even more so than the canon version. I think he wouldn't want any province to need the Emperor's help in defending itself unless the enemy was seriously great, and is so active in his pursuit of beastmen and chaos forces that I could see him leading some more purges throughout the lands and even outside of Empire territory. They're unlikely to be massively successful outside of his purge of the Drakwald, but Toddy isn't the type of emperor to just sit on his hammer until some threat comes his way, which is why he'd bolster the Empire's own troops. For the everyday citizen, I'd expect Toddy's empire to be quite a bit harsher and stricter than that of Karl Franz. When Karl Franz wanted to establish a law that essentially decriminalised mutants, only Toddy stood against it. So sorry if you've got a horn sticking out of your head, but you will end up dead. Harsher measures against mutants are likely to lead to life being tougher not only for them but for non-humans as well. If you're a stupid peasant who doesn't realise your neighbour is a dwarf and not a stunted chaos worshipper, the witch hunters may soon be arresting the wrong guy. Moreover, considering how strict Toddy is about chaos and its influence, things like imports and immigration would seriously be regulated. Also, to feed these stronger and bigger armies Toddy would be fielding in defence of the Empire, farmers are going to have to be working a lot harder and living off less. Again, it might not make for the most popular emperor, but the citizens of the Empire would largely be safer from external threats than they had been in the past. I don't think that Boris Todbringer's empire would be as effective as one led by Karl Franz. Toddy is too prone to personal disputes, as shown by his rivalry with Khazrak One-Eye, which even led him to abandon Middenheim in the end time so he could get rid of his arch-nemesis. Karl Franz is perhaps not as harsh, and therefore this could lead to Toddy being seen as more of a threat to the Empire's enemies, but then again, Karl Franz was no pushover, and thanks to his diplomacy kept the Empire safe thanks to its allies, as well as its own strengths. In another era, Toddy would have been a fine emperor, but that's just it. Fine, I think, is the best way to describe him, unless you're a Middenlander, in which case he's the best leader you've ever seen. He'd keep other elector counts in line, and would have made it better than Luitpold, but in comparison to Franz, I think for once Warhammer canon made the best choice, rather than forcing a grimdark future with a worse leader. But hey, that's just my opinion. Do you think Toddy would have been a better emperor? I've always thought of him best as an attack dog, really, and when do you ever let a dog lead itself? I'm sure one of you will find me wrong though, so let me hear it and I'll see you in the next one, ghouls and gals.